You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey listeners, welcome back. Today is Wednesday, March 25th. We have a recurring special guest, the man who needs no introduction, Phil Koopman. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, guys. Great to be back.
Maybe I should have asked you if you wanted a specific introduction.
That's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Everybody knows you at this point. You know, you're the fourth Marx Brothers in this show. So we're going to talk a lot about the wonderful world and Michael's favorite subject lately, Waymo, aren't we? We're going to talk more and more about self-driving cars. But let's start off with an article from David Zipper, who's in Bloomberg, titled, "Here Comes the Self-Driving Traffic Surge." Now, what's interesting about this is, you know, they sell self-driving vehicles as being, hey, this is going to make everything wonderful and all the world will be great and traffic will never happen. Accidents won't be a thing. Your kids will, like you more. But this article points out that more of AVs will lead to more traffic because people will be taking rides that they normally wouldn't take now. But the interesting part of this article that jumped out at me was quoting, "As of late 2025, deadheading represented almost half of Waymo's total miles driven in the Bay Area." And that's just an empty Waymo just driving around looking for a fare or going back to recharge or something like that. So, gentlemen, it seems that AVs are not the answer to everything.
Well, so I have some thoughts on this.
Perfect.
First of all, ride hail spends a lot of time deadheading too.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so an easy way to look at it is this is just ride hail without the person in the front. And why would you expect it to be any different other than if someday it's cheaper, like they keep promising? Last I heard, when the cost goes down, demand goes up. So the issue is going to be that if it actually ends up being cheaper, you're going to see increased demand. In some cities like San Francisco, New York, that's going to be huge. In other cities where the roads are empty, maybe not as big a deal.
The other takeaway I got from this was another quote: "Waymo's Bay Area riders pay a premium of at least 10% to take a robo-taxi instead of a human-driven ride hail." So people are just paying extra because they don't want to have to deal with a person, which is very Silicon Valley from my experience.
It sounds like that's a big draw. I mean, we've gone through that before. I think I can't remember who it was, an article or a lobbyist or someone talking about, their driver not smelling great or whatever it is. There's kind of a negative sheen that's attached to some drivers of, cabs and rideshare. And also, I think this article cited, you can play your own music, control your own, air conditioning. You can do all these things on your own without running it through a driver. I mean, I guess for those of us that are, not social creatures, that could be a benefit worth paying a little more for.
So with human drivers on one of the services, you can pay more for them not to talk to you. That's actually a thing.
Wait, really?
Wow. Yeah. Quiet ride. And it's an upcharge.
Wow. That's just so rude and weird. I don't know.
Well, that, people are willing to pay, fine. It's the question really is that because it's novel, or is that going to be enduring? And even if it's an upcharge compared to a human driver, if more supply drives the cost down, you're going to get more use because that's just how it's going to be, right?
Yeah. There were some other negative outcomes.
Go
ahead, Fred.
Speaking of people not talking, I did a little research this morning, and using AI, it turns out that Waymo has either 2,500 or 3,000 cars in service right now. AI is very useful because I asked it for an answer, and so it gave me two different answers. So who the hell knows? But they also said that they've got 70 people staffing their remote driving capability at any time. So using advanced mathematics, it turns out that that means each remote driver's got 42.857 cars they're responsible for. And, each task or each driving task for the Waymos is roughly 20 minutes, right? They said it's 10 miles, and assuming it's 30 miles an hour, you've got 20 minutes per trip. So for each trip, the allocation of time for a remote driver is about 30 seconds. And I don't know, to me, this doesn't seem like a lot of time to spend looking at all the safety critical events that can happen that, need supervision in the cars. What do you think about that, Phil? What do you think about those numbers?
Well, the 30 seconds per trip is an average, so it could be 5 minutes on one and nothing on a bunch of others. So it's hard to use the averages there.
Well, yeah, that's an average. Yeah.
So Waymo would probably say that demonstrates cost effectiveness because they've improved the driver to vehicle ratio, which is their big thing. And if they were intervening effectively, I'd say that was great. What we're seeing on the roads is a lot of situations where they're not able to intervene effectively. And I have a little side before we go down that path, because I think that's getting into my main point for today.
It is.
There's another thing about the half empty statistic, which is subtle but important for safety. If the cars are half empty or empty half the time, then that means if they get in a crash, it is by definition a non-injury crash to the occupants. And there's a old blog entry on this. I did some quick math. And basically, if you only look at occupant injuries, setting aside pedestrian injuries, if you only look at occupant injuries, if you have exactly the same number of crashes in a robotaxi as in a ride hail, you should expect 1/3 the number of injuries, because half the time the robotaxi has nobody and half the time it has one person. But a ride hail, half the time it has one person, and half the time it has two people. And if you do the math, just if you had exactly the same crashes with no differences at all, you would expect 1/3 the injuries, or half the injury crash, depending on how you know. So if somebody says, "Oh, we only have half as many injury crashes as a ride hail," it's like, so you're no different at all. Now it's interesting. If there's no drivers being hurt, maybe that's a good thing. There's fewer people being hurt. But it's not a direct measure of how many bad crashes are happening. It's just that the vehicle's empty when it crashes. So when that Waymo crashed into a utility pole, there was no one in it. So there was no injury. But it might have been as much because it was empty as because it was, that doesn't mean it was not a big crash.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, the other thing about the claims of safety by Waymo that's interesting to me is that, number one, the statistics that they cite are not supported by the references that they put on their website. So that's kind of interesting. And the references that they put on their website are no more current than 2022. In 2022, they were restricted in both speed and geography to where they could go and how quickly they could go there. So there's a lot of bullshit going on there, Phil, it seems to me.
And by all accounts, had very different software. They apparently have incorporated end-to-end learning in the last year, and that wasn't there for the old data. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions on this data, and a bigger thing. Everything. I think you said this last episode, Fred. It made sense. But another thing to put on top is, if you have I guess they're at 170 million miles of data, whatever they are at, which is still, they're going to need, by the time the dust settles, they'll need 1 billion. They still have a long way to go to get statistical significance if nothing changed. But it did change. They're completely changing the software stack to be end-to-end. And from a statistical point of view, you can't count old software against new. It's like, well, I drove, and this is not quite what they're saying, but I drove 100 million miles in a Waymo, then I drove 1 million miles in a Tesla, so I get to divide the Tesla data by 101 million. No, it doesn't work that way. But I drove around 100 million miles in an old Waymo that had componentized machine learning. I switched to end-to-end, I drive 1 million miles. You don't get to divide by 101, but that's kind of what they're doing.
Right. So, and those are all trailing statistics. So that's trailing indicators. So they've got nothing to do with the future behavior of those vehicles.
This is another way to get at it. But the issue is the problem is, the rhetorical problem here is, if you have something that's really bad, and we don't know if it's really good or bad because of the following problem. If you go 100 million miles with something pretty good, you have something that's twice as bad, which still in the world of auto safety is still pretty safe. It's one fatality per 50 million instead of 100 million. It's going to be a long time before you see that happen. But if you go 1 million with something twice as dangerous, you dilute the numbers by a factor of 100. So if you put out something that's really dangerous and divide by the entire history, you can do that and then fix it, and you haven't really changed the statistics at all because there's so much inertia from the history. So dividing by the entire life of all the versions of software tells you nothing about the current version.
Right.
And it's what you said. I'm just sort of coming at it a different way.
Well, what Waymo has said, and paraphrasing, saying every software release is validated to operate exactly as it's designed.
So does that mean I have to be snarky because I'm on the show. Does that mean it's designed to pass school buses without stopping? Because that's what that says, right?
I don't even understand what that sentence means.
100%, but I don't get it.
I'm sure, to be clear, I'm sure they didn't intend to say that, but that's where you end up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And they keep in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they still don't count any accidents where the Waymo gets rear-ended, right?
Well, they don't count anything that's not their fault, apparently.
But I mean, California is a no-fault state
they
too.
Say anything they can say is not more than 50% their fault, they don't like to count, depending which study and which metric you're looking at.
And they don't say what at fault means. I mean, is that their own opinion? Is that the opinion of an insurance company? Is that, what the hell does that actually mean? It's mixing legal with engineering descriptions. It's not an approach that's safe.
There is a precise definition sort of for one of the really old ones, way, way back when they only had a few million miles, they did the insurance study. And the problem, what at fault meant was that their insurance policy paid out to a third party.
Mm-hmm.
But what that leaves out is where there was no payment, or it was 49.9% their fault, or if it's that kind of state. But the other thing that some of my insurance friends pointed out is that if you pay cash at the time of the crash to settle it out of your pocket, that doesn't show up in your insurance, and that's also not your fault. And we don't know whether they did that or not. But my insurance friends looked at this study and said, "Well, there's all sorts of loopholes." Or if there's a court battle, if there's dispute, and you don't pay out till 5 years later, for those 5 years, it doesn't count as a payout, right? Yeah. So those kind of studies have lots of problems. Basically, if you're talking blame in this game, if you're trying to talk about safety and you use the word blame or use the word fault, you're just trying to dodge the numbers.
Right. Well, there's another issue with this, with the Waymo. The terms of service say that people can't sue. So the amount you can recover is severely limited by the fact that you've signed up for the service. So that's another thing that skews the data away from fault.
So Michael's the lawyer on the call, but if you sign binding arbitration and the Waymo insurance company says no, that counts as not their fault, and your options for recourse are limited.
Okay, so we know that Waymo's PR team is top-notch, fabulous. We know that they're playing some statistical
absolutely,
games.
Man. Some of the stuff they get away with saying. Yep.
It's next level. Like Orwell is sitting there cracking up, spinning in his grave. One thing that Waymo has said is, and this is written down, we don't have a teen program. Teens are not allowed in our vehicle except in the Phoenix area. You must be 13. Your parents sign a waiver. Nowhere else on planet Earth does Waymo have a teen program. And so now,
how about preteens? Are they allowed?
No, you have to be at least 13. 13 and you always have to be. If you're under the age of 18, you have to be accompanied by an adult, except for this restricted area in Phoenix where you can get your parents, if you're over 13, to sign a liability waiver or something. You're allowed to do it. But we've pointed out on the show that there's people in San Francisco talking about, I'm putting my 9-year-old in the car, sending him off to school. And, Waymo's well aware of this. And now the California Gig Workers Union has filed a complaint against Waymo, quoting from their press release. The California Gig Workers Union and its affiliates filed a formal complaint with the California Public Utilities Commission, alleging that Waymo has been knowingly violating the conditions of its state permit by transporting unaccompanied minors through its autonomous ride-hailing service in California, which raises serious public safety and regulatory compliance concerns. Now, Mr. Brooks, as an attorney, what technique does Waymo use to just be like, that's fine, don't worry about it?
Oh, I mean, they've got to go before. Apparently, they're going to have to go before the California Public Utilities Commission, which we discussed in the past, primarily in relation to its actions with GM Cruise. And they've got a lot of, there are a lot of different complaints here, right? There's transporting unaccompanied minors, whether Waymo has safeguards in place to prevent this from happening, like age verification. I mean, we know that Waymo can basically see into every vehicle and can monitor who and what is there and what's going on. So, reasonable safeguards might include looking at the passenger to determine whether or not they are a minor, that type of thing. And then they're looking to suspend Waymo's permit, going for financial penalties for previous violations and a number of other things, ultimately resulting in some type of, mandatory age verification happening. And I don't think this is just a Waymo issue. I mean, Waymo is obviously taking a lot of heat, both from us and from regulators in a lot of areas, because they're kind of the big boy on the block that's out there first and making all these mistakes. I definitely don't want to lose track of the rest of the industry, as happens a lot in articles, because there are first of all, Waymo is using Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard compliant vehicles to do this. There are a lot of vehicles from Zoox and from other companies that are proposed that don't even meet those standards that are going to be operating on our roads soon, and have far less miles accumulated with Waymo using a different technology that hasn't been tested quite as long as Waymo. So, my concerns about Waymo exist, and yet I find myself often wondering, what does the future hold for these other companies that are kind of riding into the scene on Waymo's coattails without any of the, experience and, kind of underlying safety focus that, we've seen from Waymo in some areas. We're not sure that that's going to translate to the rest of the industry. Tesla obviously is one of the concerning parties there.
I think that's fair. There's a lot of fast and loose going on in the industry. We beat on Waymo, even though they're better behaved than most.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Waymo is past the point where they could say, oh, give us a break, we're still learning.
Yeah.
When you brag about how many 100 million miles you have, and and your slogan is you're the world's most experienced driver and all these things, you can't play the but we're still learning game. You can't have it both ways.
Well, my Gaslight nomination this week will address exactly that. How the Waymo infection is spreading to Europe.
Okay, well, before we get into that, let's do a gentle feed into that. I think there's an article from KGW8 titled "Watch Driverless Waymo Vehicle Turns into Oncoming Traffic and Blocks Roads in Houston." And so this is a case where a Waymo starts trying to go down the wrong way, down a one-way street, pauses, blocks traffic, hangs out there for a while, but then some mysterious person in a faraway land moves the vehicle remotely. Because what do we know about autonomous vehicles? There's always somebody who's driving the vehicle, or at least monitoring the vehicle, or paying attention. I don't know. I think, Phil, you can explain what happens here. At what point is the computer not doing the dynamic driving task? There's a lot. I'm just going to let you go. I'll leave the room.
Okay, I will give this a shot. For every robotaxi that's going to be practical on the roads for the foreseeable future, there will be at some point in time someone not in the robotaxi who's going to deal with its operation. This applies to robotruck. I'll say robotaxis, but it's going to apply to robotrucks as well. And the issue is you're in a world that is not fully defined. The world is full of craziness, and no computer can deal with all of it. And if you're saying, well, we use machine learning and it's really flexible, it's like, well, it can only learn what it's seen by example. And when there's something it's never seen, it's going to struggle. And saying that that's going to go away by next Tuesday is just wishful thinking. This is with us for the long term. It's one of the fundamental hard problems of technology. Now, that's not bad on its own. You just have to embrace it instead of deny it. So there will be times where it needs some help. And the question is, how does that help happen? And what are the safety implications? And so in China, and for some, maybe Tesla, we don't really know, there's somebody watching it all the time, or maybe somebody watching 5 or 10 all the time. It's just there's a continuous feed, and their job is to jump in when it needs help. And if you're watching 10, it better not be grab the steering wheel on a highway because if two of them have that problem or it takes too long. But if it gets stuck and you have to jump in, you can notice it's stuck without it telling you it's stuck, right? So, but in the US especially, and for companies like Waymo, what they would say is, no, we're not watching them all the time. There have been times when we know they were watching them all the time, but for now, let's just say that's the case. They're not actually watching them all the time. They can drop in randomly if they want, but the story they tell is, well, the robotaxi's in charge and it phones home for help. It phones a friend. It uses a lifeline, depending on your age and what your TV watching history is. Right? It calls in for help, and they call that a remote assistant. So a remote driver is someone with a steering wheel. And a remote assistant is, I'm just here to provide friendly advice. Now, what they will claim, based on some standards and guidelines, they'll claim, so SAJ 3016, the standard that defines the levels, also defines a remote assistant, and I'm not going to read the precise language, but remote assistant is someone who drops in to help when the trip cannot or should not continue without some human perspective. But J3016 is not a safety standard. It's explicitly not a safety standard. It just says, here's the definition of a role, make of it what you will. But there's another document from AVSC, Fred's favorite organization, AVSC, which is not a standard, which is not really a best practice because it's a closed group that publishes whatever they want through SAE. It's a bunch of autonomous vehicle companies, and they publish this technical information with an SAE banner, but it's really just their publication. And some of the stuff they publish is pretty good, but this one has a problem in it. So it's the AVSC I-04-2023 Best Practice for ADS Remote Assistance Use Case. That's the title. Good luck with that. Okay,
we'll put a link to it.
You can put a link to it, and you could. The good thing about AVSC is you can download them for free, unlike real SAE standards you have to pay for most of them. So it's about how remote assistants work. And what they do is they divide the world into there's remote drivers and remote assistants. And remote drivers perform a substantive part of the dynamic driving task. So they're moving the steering wheel, they're working the accelerator, they're working the brakes in some combination as if they're in the car. This is the very generalized thing. And remote assistants, well, they don't have vehicle controls. Okay, we're still okay. And in practice, you'll see interaction like a pop-up menu on a screen. And the remote assistant just clicks a box, and the car will ask, is this traffic light red or green? And they'll click red or they'll click green. Or is this thing on the road a plastic garbage bag, or is it a person who's fallen on the road? That's actually an example from the guidance. That's actually in there, wow. Okay? It says, if is it a bag, that means it may be okay to run over. And having a person remotely do these is probably a good thing, because I'd really rather have a person check in on that than have the machine guess when it's not really sure what's going on. So this is okay so far. But the place where this gets problematic is the industry position is if the remote person is not a driver, then they do not play a safety role. It's just advice. The car's responsible. They use the word, the car is responsible. The computer in the car, the automated driving system, is responsible for safety. They've got a problem with this. The problem with this is that a computer can't be responsible for anything because it's not a person. It has no duty of care for the safety of other road users. You can't sue it. It has nothing to pay you with if you could sue it because it's not a person. It's not even a fictitious person. It can't be responsible for anything. That's just playing hide the ball. So literally nobody's responsible. But quoting right from the AVSC document, while the remote assistant may address certain mission-relevant tasks, it cannot perform safety-critical functions like the DDT. And that's a huge gaslight. That's my gaslight. That's a huge gaslight because it clearly performs part of the DDT. Saying it can't perform all means it has nothing to do with safety. I'm sorry, if the remote person is saying that's a garbage bag, it's okay to run over, even though you're not sure, and you run over it, you can't say the computer's responsible for running over the person who's fallen into the street. And this standard lets the industry, gives them a reason to say, but it wasn't the remote person's fault either, because they're not actually the driver. So whose fault is it? Literally nobody's. And there's a bunch of tort liability versus product liability, which we can go to if you guys really want to. But this is really a huge problem. And one of the examples on page 12, table 2 lists confirming or changing trajectory. For example, whether there's an empty plastic grocery bag or a person, right? So that's clearly an issue. There was also a recorded mishap involving Waymo, and the written thing in the SGO data is a little unclear. Missy Cummings has gone on record saying there's more nuance to it. So let me do the two versions. We read the SGO, it basically and some accompanying insider info that got published. It was that the traffic light was red, but the remote assistant said it was green, and the Waymo entered the intersection in a crossing. I think it was a moped rider wiped out trying to avoid it, right? And the car would not have entered the intersection if the remote assistant had not said it was green. There's no way that would have happened, right? So tell me that's not part of completing the dynamic driving task, in particular, object and event detection and recognition, saying, hey, what color is the traffic light? Now, the story that Missy Cummings tells us, it was a little more nuanced. It was that a time delay was involved, was that it was actually sort of a stale yellow. And by the time the remote assistant opined that it was yellow and for whatever reason was okay to turn, it had turned red by the time the answer came back, which is also interesting. But either way you go, it's still the remote assistant was clearly playing a driving safety role. But if you have this thing on the road, you don't know what it is, you ask, is it okay to run over? Click yes or no. I understand you don't have a steering wheel. I understand you don't have a gas pedal, but don't tell me that you have no role to play in safety.
And we saw the same thing in one of the school bus incidents, right?
And so this really came to a head. One of the school bus incidents, the remote assistant said, "Oh, that's not a school bus with its stop sign out, so it's okay to go by." And no one got hurt that time, but that's an issue. So these remote assistants are making decisions. I look at it as they're making decisions. They're not driving. They're making driving decisions. Is it okay to do X, Y? They're granting permission. And the thing they're granting permission for is something that carries inherent life-critical risk in many cases. Yeah. And so saying they have no, as this guidance says, it cannot perform safety-critical functions, that's just not true. And we've already seen multiple incidents that demonstrate this is not true.
Yeah. And we're even seeing, this kind of, we're seeing the industry lobby to get language that would cement this position into federal law. The Self-Drive Act that was proposed earlier this year essentially defines, and the definition section says, the automated driving system in ADAS shall be considered to be the driver of a vehicle when the ADAS is engaged, virtually eliminating responsibility from remote drivers and, eliminating the ability of injured parties to go after whoever it is that can be considered responsible here in the absence of ADS computing systems having bank accounts.
And where this ends up is, there's another side. I'm going to tease this again, but we don't have to go into it right now, that you can sue a driver under tort negligence liability, but you have to sue a computer under product liability, which is much more expensive, much harder, and a different set of criteria. But this allows the remote drivers to hide behind the product liability, right? So now people say, well, what about the operators in the Philippines? Well, the remote operators in the Philippines, if you believe the car is responsible, they have no responsibility for safety. They just picked it. And Waymo will say, well, they have driver's license and you should feel good they're carefully selected. And maybe that will always be true for Waymo, even when they come under cross pressure. We'll see how that turns out. But it is not necessarily true for every company in every situation for all time. And by the way, here's the cognitive dissonance. If they have nothing to do with safety, why do you care if they have driver licenses? Why do you feel need to tell us they have driver licenses if they have nothing to do with safety? That's trying to put my finger on the cognitive dissonance that just gets everyone uncomfortable about this. But wait, there's more. If they really have nothing to do with safety, if they have nothing to do with safety, why isn't some high school kids in Thailand who are using their Xbox to give the feedback?
I don't see.
They have nothing to do with safety. Why should it matter who they are?
Well, why is it anybody if it has nothing to do with safety?
Why not?
Why are they
just say,
needed?
yeah, I mean, do you turn left or right? Well, we're going to have three 8-year-olds with their Xbox playing a game, and this is an in-game mission, and 2 of them said left, 1 said right, so we're going with left. I mean, and yeah, you think I'm exaggerating, but a lot of AI turns out to be repackaging overseas cheap labor and running it through machine learning, right? There's the whole deal about mechanical Turks and all that other stuff, and you have to assume that if there's cost pressure, you get what you incentivize. If there's cost pressure and there's no regulatory oversight of the quality and the diligence of the remote workers, you're going to see a push to the bottom on cost. Why would you expect anything else to happen?
Yeah. And again, I'll say, Waymo is probably the best example of good practices in the industry here. So
Yes.
what does that say about what's coming our way? Particularly if, Congress allows for these massive exemptions and expansion of current law to allow these types of vehicles to scale quickly. I think we're going to see some really negative safety outcomes.
And to be clear, so I was in DC at NHTSA and did a panel, and there were some other panels there, and it was a really interesting day. On the stage, someone said the computer driver used not quite these words, but they said the computer driver is responsible for safety. Used the word responsible, and it wasn't Waymo. This is an industry position. Waymo's out there because they have the most cars. But this is the industry all singing out the same songbook, and Waymo's just the one having the incidents because they have more, a couple thousand. Yeah. Fred, your numbers were about right. It's 2,000-3,000 cars and something like 70 operators.
All right, so I've got a couple questions here. So the computer driver is responsible. So the second
ADS, if you want to be uptight, it's the automated driving system, ADS level 3, 4, 5. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that computer gets into some accident and whatnot. So from an evidentiary point of view, is that system software all locked down now so it can't be over the air updated by accident? Because this version is involved in an accident. It's responsible. Is all of that taken off of the market now? Because it doesn't exist in one location. It exists in 3,000 locations at once.
Well, if you pull power, it's sort of frozen in.
Right. Well, and
I'll go back to,
you have to do that fleet wide.
And if you live in Oklahoma, you remove the computer and throw it in a jail cell, put a new computer in, you're good to go, because that computer was the one that was responsible. And I wonder if the federal statute that Michael's talking about ends up there.
But we it's not just physical hardware that's the computer; it's software as well.
So you pull the memories out too. The whole box goes in the jail cell.
Okay, so do we do that with all 3,000 Waymo computer drivers out there?
Those are different computers.
That's insane.
So they're different drivers.
Oh, that's not.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Sanity left the building quite a while back.
Okay.
You missed the exit.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to try another version. So Waymo driving down the street, it's moving at 35 miles per hour. I don't know at what distance its cameras and sensors see a object that it doesn't know what it is. How far out is that? 100 yards, 500 yards?
Oh, they go. I mean, even back in 2015, when I rode in one in DC, it was hundreds of yards out in front of the vehicle the LiDAR was seeing.
Okay, so
the resolution is an issue, but I mean, seeing something small that far out is hard. But just get a single point back. But they basically, if you can see it, they can see it, but they see it differently and maybe not with the same resolution, maybe not with the same depth of perception.
So my question is, as an object in the road, it doesn't know what it is. It's moving at 35 miles per hour. There's traffic behind it. What is it doing before it calls for help? Is it slowing and upsetting the traffic behind them because everyone goes, it's just a plastic bag, who cares? Or is it getting there, stopping, or is it continuing at the same speed?
It depends on the company. There's no standard that requires it to do anything.
Okay, so let's pretend.
So Waymo, I want to be fair to Waymo. Please. What Waymo will tell you is the car is 100% responsible for ensuring safety. It phones a friend. Much of the time, it figures it out before the friend even responds and continues on its way. There are a bunch of requests for remote assistance that never actually connect. And when Cruise had these bad numbers about every 2 to 5 miles, one of the things they said is a bunch of those never actually even connect because it sorts itself out before we can call home, and we're doing it proactively. And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Sure.
So be careful. If it calls home and it sorts it on its own, then that's fine. You shouldn't say that cost is I would prefer them to call home more often than they need to out of abundance of caution. There should not be penalized for that. So it calls home and the car is responsible. The Waymo story is the car is responsible for safety the entire time. So if the person doesn't answer or the person takes a long time to respond, that's on the car. It's not on the person.
Okay, but then the person back in headquarters, wherever.
At some point, the person provides info, and they're going to be under time pressure. Why? Because it's a call center. All call centers are under time pressure. And meanwhile, you're clogging up traffic, and you've been told not to let the thing clog up traffic too long and all these other things. So you're under some time pressure. You have to gain situational awareness. You have to figure out what's happening. In some cases, whether or not they do, I don't know, but you should review the last 30 seconds of driving to find out if there's something under the car you can't see that happened to Cruise, right? The remote assistants didn't have time to respond, but that would have been something they would have had to deal with when there's a pedestrian in the car. So to do this properly, you have to review how it got there. You have to review where you are. You have to decide what to do next. And you're looking through cameras and you haven't lived it, so you have to go back and sort of re-experience it. This can take a while.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, because then there's this longer delay, and there's also the response, and this person who's maybe is overworked as an air traffic controller.
Well, there's another dimension to it. There's another dimension to it, which is that there is a process for escalating the issue to higher authority. And what Waymo says is that, the initial contact comes into the Philippines or somebody like the Philippines, but then they've got to take important issues or really dangerous issues, promote them to personnel who are in Detroit, Michigan, and have them resolve the issue. So in each case, at each step in the process, there's got to be what Phil was talking about, the recognition of the situation, development of situational awareness, a judgment that the issue has to be either disposed of there or escalated to a higher issue or to a higher echelon. And if that happens, then you've got to reestablish that situational awareness. So, this is useless for any active safety issue that comes up as the car is moving along, because you simply don't have the time to respond with the human input, even if they're responsible or if they're not responsible. You have no time for that human input before the Waymo is going to bang into that situation.
Yeah. So realistically, the car has to be able to be safe no matter what. It can call for remote assistance. And if you have a time-dependent issue, that's a problem, because time pressure is the enemy of getting these answers right. You don't want time pressure. Now, when you're done, you say, okay, the car's pulled itself to the side of the road, but we're in an intersection. Can we move 2 meters forward to get out of the intersection? And it's okay to take 2 or 3 minutes to figure this out because people are honking at you, but things are stable. Sure, there's nothing wrong with that at all, as long as you can see the 2 or 3 meters and a bunch of other things. But if you're at a light that's changing colors and the question is, do I go now? You're just asking for trouble, and we've seen that trouble occur, apparently.
Right. But it's the computer that's at fault. All right, that's a really good gaslight. Now, Michael, I got to ask you before we move on, is Phil right in that it's the individual computer that caused the problem, or is my argument being like they're all running the same software and hardware, more or less? That it should be all of them.
All of who?
All of the Waymo drivers.
All of the drivers.
All because they're all the same. They're all the same software theoretically.
I don't even know. I have a hard time even understanding what that question means, since we don't really have any reference for how the computer system could be liable in the first place, right? So,
well, Utah is in the middle of passing a law, so this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
the governor's going to sign a law. Well, so Anthony, this gets down to: is it a product defect or is it the equivalent of a driver defect? If it's a product defect, they're all defective, right? But if you're going after this particular car made a mistake, and we're gonna hold that car's driver accountable and not ask the product defect question, because you could have machine learning that isn't really defective, because the best you can do is 99%. No technology that's cost effective would do better. 99% is all you get. 1% of the time, it just runs the light. I hope the numbers are better than that. I'm using an easy number. But that could be technically not a defective product. It's just not a very good one. And if you want to say, well, the 1%, you need to hold it accountable, then none of them are defective. It's just once in a while it makes a mistake and you decided it's important to hold them accountable when they do.
Wow.
So it could be a single car for tort negligence style liability, and it could be all the cars for product liability. And the question is what theory you're pursuing when you try and hold accountable there.
Well, there's going to be some interesting lawsuits in the future.
Well, ultimately, if you can't hold the human actors and the corporation behind all this responsible, then I don't know that anything makes sense here. I mean, at some point, don't we reach just this area of absurdity in the law that requires someone to pin the tail on, right?
Well, it's absurd, but I think where they're going is they're going to say, all right, because in Utah, I think it's only $100,000, right?
Oh,
It's a low number, and $1 million for pain and suffering, which compared to the feds just came out with a new number that's I think 14.2 million value of human life. That's the new number for 2025, right? Yep. So it's more than a factor of 10, factor 100 off. But you, as a practical matter, if you really want to go this way, which I think Michael and I both have a problem with, but if you want to go this way, you say, look, you carry $100,000 of insurance, that money's in play. If there's a crash, the insurance pays off or it doesn't. Max pot is $100K. After that, too bad.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's where they're going. That's the path they're on.
Oh, boy.
Now, the Utah law is a little interesting because it says, a plaintiff is not required to prove a product defect. I mean, there's some interesting parts in it, right?
It smells like tort negligence, right? They think they're trying to, the path I said is you don't have to prove product defect. You just have to prove the thing ran a red light and hit you. And you have access to up to $100,000 for direct damages. And if it's more than 100,000, well, you're going to have to prove product defect now.
Yeah.
So I like the fact this law exists because it's finally trying to admit that product liability is the wrong tool for the job. But I don't think this law gets us all the way there.
No. And I think the law also eliminates punitive damages, which are necessary to, whip into shape bad actors in the industry.
I haven't talked to them, but I'm gonna say that if the car companies are unhappy and Michael's unhappy, they're going to declare it a compromise and move on, right?
Hey, listeners, if you like tort negligence, I prefer a lemon tort. Go to autosafety.org and click on donate. And with that, Mr. Perkins, you have a gaslight.
I do. And this is a kind of a complex one, but it is a gaslight that's related to a company called Wave with an assist from The Guardian and Waymo. So jump right into it. There was an article published in The Guardian called "We Don't Tell the Car What It Should Do, My Ride in a Self-Driving Taxi." And Steve Rose goes for a drive in a car developed by a company called Wave, which is trying to compete with Waymo and other similar companies in England. And so he took a drive in a car, and he says driverless robotaxis will be accepting fares in Britain's biggest city by the end of next year. And then the president of the company Wave says, "I'm really excited to show you this," says Alex Kendall. And so they get in the car, and quoting from the article, "By the time I step out 20 minutes later, I'm convinced Wave is a better driver than most humans." Well, it's interesting because what the hell is he basing that on? He's one person in one car. He has crossed maybe 1,000 cars going in another direction, all of whom apparently reached their destination safely. So why in the world does he think that there's somehow something superior about his uneventful trip compared to all the other uneventful trips he's been observing? He never really explains that. But there's a couple details that are worth noting. Kendall says, the president of Wave says, "This is how Wave's AI differs from other versions. It's got a sense of being able to predict how the world works, how to predict risk and safety. It's actually understanding the dynamics of the scene." Nonsense. All nonsense, right?
It's understanding, Fred. Come on. Define understanding.
So this is a great example, I think. He says, "When another driver flashes their lights, our car understands that they're letting us go first." Now, my interpretation of that is if the car detects a flashing light, it assumes it has the right of way. This seems incredibly dangerous to me because there's a hell of a lot of flashing lights out there. But, that's one of his accomplishments. He goes on to say, globally, we've driven over 7 million miles all autonomously, Kendall says. And Phil, you might chime in. And is 7 million miles a lot to establish the safety of an AV system?
Add 3, 4 zeros to get there. Yep.
And yeah, 3 or 4 zeros trailing the 7, not in front of the 7. All right.
That is correct. That's fair enough. Fair enough. You got me, Fred.
Yeah. Just to be clear with people. Yeah.
It's not 007. It's
No.
But he says, like a human driver, Wave's AI knows enough to figure out new situations, Kendall claims. Good for them. Now he goes on to say that first generation autonomous vehicles, such as those made by Tesla and Waymo, operated essentially by breaking down the problem of driving into discrete areas, meaning that's a rule-based software system for the operation of those vehicles. Then he goes on to say, by contrast, Kendall says, Wave was built on end-to-end AI, so it's one big neural network that has the intelligence to make decisions. Paren, both Tesla and Waymo now also utilize forms of end-to-end AI, close paren, which means that even though there are significant shortcomings in the statistics for safety revealed by both Tesla and Waymo, they're both trailing indicators that have nothing to do with future behavior. It's like saying the United States has had major wars every 20 years, so every 20 years we're going to have a major war. I don't think that follows. But it also says that what they've said in the past and their claims about safety statistics are unrelated to the way they're currently operating their vehicles, because they've completely changed, as Phil said, the software stack, and they're now doing something completely different than what they were doing when they made their previous safety claims, which, again, I love saying this, were unsupported by the references they put on their website that is the basis of their safety claims. A few more things here. Wave's cars don't use it at present, LiDAR. But Kendall says Wave's AI is adaptable to any system. That's a hell of an AI. You just throw anything at it and it's all good. Anyway, noting that Waymo and Apollo Go are by far the two largest robotaxi operators in the world. Waymo completes 450,000 rides a week. Boy, that seems like a lot. And Apollo Go recording 250,000 rides a week. Going back to AVSC, noting that Apollo Go is not included in the AVSC coalition. Neither is Tesla. So really the largest producers of self-driving vehicles in the world are only represented by Waymo in the AVSC. AVSC is basically set up to pretend that there's a safety standard that's written exclusively by the manufacturers for their own benefit and without any input from third parties or interested advocates like us. So there's a problem here. And I'm going to leave it there, I guess, because, one more. In response, a Waymo spokesperson pointed to a recent poll of people in San Francisco that said 73% feel safe with Waymos on their streets, and 68% say the vehicles have a positive impact on road safety. This is the result of PR and the creation of an urban myth by Waymo. So I think I've made my case here, and I'm giving Waymo, actually, and Wave the Gaslight of the Week award with an assist to The Guardian.
Okay, that's a complex trifecta.
Let me comment on one aspect of that, which I think is sort of important. When someone takes a ride in a Waymo or Tesla FSD, you hear these, "Oh, I did Tesla FSD. It's a better driver than I am," kind of quotes, right? Or the Wave quote. With 7 million miles, you don't have statistical significance for safety, and we all know for life critical safety, we know that. Why are they saying it's better? Well, there's a difference between driving fluency and safety. So I expect a good, solid end-to-end machine learning to be better at driver fluency than a rule-based system, because it has spent all its computations learning how to act like a person. So when someone flashes your lights, if you see a couple white lights attached to something that looks like a car and it's about the right elevation and angle to be at an intersection, and the last 1,000 times a human driver saw that they turned in front, it's going to turn in front too. It's going to be, I mean, if you have an LLM is spooky the way it talks like it's a person, right? So why is it hard to believe that you have an equivalent foundation model based on driving data that is spooky and that it drives like a person? That's not a hard stretch, but that's driving fluency. It isn't necessarily safety. Now, fluency and safety go together at, if you can't go 100 feet without hitting something, well, that's pretty unsafe. And fluency means you're not hitting stuff every block. Okay, cool. But that's the beginning of the safety journey, not the end. And fluency doesn't predict what's going to happen when something unexpected happens, which is where most of the hardcore safety stuff lives. So you can get the feeling that it's a safer driver because you're modeling on it. Does it feel like a good human driver? And the best ones are going to feel just like a good human driver. But in a 10-minute, 1 hour ride, you're not going to see the 1 in a million hour things that's out where fatal crashes live. So that's why it feels sort of like a paradox.
Oh, thanks. That's a great point. One other thing I want to say about this article in The Guardian is that they ended it by saying, if you'd like to submit a response of up to 300 words by email to be considered for publication, please click here. It was a dead link.
It was just dead just for you, though.
Yeah, it was dead just for Fred.
They must have known I was going to read it, I guess.
Special for Fred, absolutely.
Yeah.
You should just enter that into an LLM and be like, hey, why is this link dead? And we'll come back and say, excellent question. You're very insightful. Let me think about that. Mr. Brooks, gaslight me.
All right. My gaslight this week is going to the Washington Post editorial board.
Oh, you sneaky son of a...
They wrote this opinion piece, generally centered around the district Department of Transportation, which is very late on a study that was directed by the city council a number of years ago to allow us to start the process for AVs to go to the nation's capital. But the Post's commentary on it sounds strangely familiar, as if they are going directly off industry talking points. So I'll give a few examples of that. First off, they essentially accuse the DC Department of Transportation of sabotaging the rollout of autonomous vehicles in the nation's capital, which I think is just jumping the shark to the extent that I don't think that the DC Department of Transportation is actively attempting to sabotage autonomous vehicles. It's a difficult issue. The DC Department of Transportation is probably trying to catch up and probably, like most government agencies, underfunded and incapable of doing so. But here's where it starts really getting good. Robo-taxis operated by Waymo, the leading AV firm, have logged more than 170 million fully autonomous miles with a safety record that puts human drivers to shame. Clearly, that we've heard from industry over and over, that type of nonsense around statistically insignificant miles. Next, if the district doesn't move forward, maintenance and support operations to Maryland, or legislators seem friendlier to the idea of letting Waymo vehicles operate. It would be a sad legacy for Mayor Bowser if Maryland beats the capital city to the technology of the future. If anything, that sounds exactly like the arguments that are being made regarding China moving ahead of the industry in the United States and why regulations need to be relaxed here. It's a continual drumbeat from the industry. And finally, given these vehicles' enviable safety record, the city ought to, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, the city ought to move past safety drivers, move past fully autonomous testing, and move directly to full deployment. And for basically serving as a mouthpiece for the AV industry in this new formulation of the Washington Post editorial board, I will give them my gaslight this week.
Excellent. Well done. You missed my favorite quote from that article that said, DC streets are no more complicated or dangerous than those of Los Angeles or San Francisco.
Yes.
That is insane. If anyone's ever been to DC, DC streets will run parallel to themselves. It's the most bizarre. I blame the French for this.
So, Michael, was that commission late, or were they passive aggressively late? How late was it?
Yeah, no, I think they were about 5-6 years late. I mean, you know,
Okay. In fairness, that sounds passive aggressively late.
yeah. I mean, having followed NHTSA for all these years, you know, 5 to 6 years doesn't seem unusual, but you know, it's a special case here.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do my gaslight that Michael assigned to me that I kind of like. It is not Waymo, it's Tesla. What? No, and it's Tesla semi trucks. Yeah. That just in itself, that's the gaslight. So Tesla has started putting out its semi trucks, and the Wall Street Journal has this very. It's like Waymo's PR wrote it. It's the chef's kiss of just nonsense because they talk to a bunch of drivers who say this is the best thing in the world ever. It's so good. It's like because I get to sit in the center of the cockpit and I don't have to shift gears anymore. I mean, that sounds great. You don't have to shift gears on an 18-wheeler. I mean, that sounds easier, but that's just an electric engine. There's nothing unique about Tesla there. But then when I go to back up and everything, it's great. I normally have to get out of the car and look around, but this has cameras everywhere. You can just go and down to some local store and get cameras that will help you do that today. There's nothing unique about this. But then the article ends with, and this is amazing. I had to look this up. Someone saying, he said that the semi pulled a 25,000 pound load of dog food up a mountain pass as though it wasn't even there. I'm not a truck driver. A 25,000 pound load. That sounds like a lot. It's not. An 18-wheeler carries double that. So, okay, they're doing this. The article also quotes that the company is expected to deliver between 5,000 and 15,000 semis in 2026 before ramping up to 50,000 trucks a year, according to a recent report by Tigris Financial Partners. Now, Tigris Financial Partners, that sounds like a legitimate firm, so I looked them up. It looks like a website that was built in 1988. Yes, 1998, 1988. It almost looks like a Gopher page. It's ridiculous. I don't want to get into specifics because it just could be poorly written stuff, but you look at some of it and you're like, this is somebody did this as a joke. Like, it does not look like a real organization at all. And sadly, this is what the Wall Street Journal did as their background. I mean, it's literally just quote what Elon Musk says, because all of the financial firms that push Tesla, they literally, as I've had many back and forth with ARK Financial, is I say, hey, where's your source for this information? And they show me tweets from Elon. I'm like, that's not a legitimate source. Come on. What are you talking about? So the fact that they're going to deliver between 5,000 and 15,000, that's not a rounding error. That's a pretty big difference. Like, that's, that's changing how your production model runs for the rest of the year. So my gaslight is the Wall Street Journal. Oh, yeah, there we go. I did it. Now, Fred made a request this week. He said that I shouldn't be able to judge the gaslight, which I frankly think Fred's gaslighting me. That's horseshit. But he said, let's have Phil judge this week. And I'm more than happy to let our guest of honor judge the gaslight winner of this week.
Well, you better be careful what you ask for.
Hey, I'm rooting for you to do the right thing.
First of all, Anthony, my benchmark is 30,000 pounds of bananas, so I know that the number is higher than that. That's the number I know.
Okay, good.
Especially if you're heading down a hill into Scranton, but only some people will get that reference.
Perfect. I'd do it just if you're hauling string beans to Utah.
There you go. Okay, so this, you warned me this was going to happen, so I'm not unawares, but it was like, well, usually you would give it to your guest. You give the gift to your guest, and I'm the guest, but you can't give it to yourself if you're the judge. That's bad form.
No,
right?
it's not bad form.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Thank you.
No.
Thank you for highlighting that
I
little detail.
softballed that to you. Do the right thing. Choose yourself.
So I have an answer that pleases everyone.
We all get
You're
a
not
trophy.
gonna like it. He's giving me this. Yes,
here.
we all get trophies. That's correct. It's a participation award.
All right.
Participation trophy.
Everyone
Just like
wins.
the president. I love that.
All right. Green ribbons for everyone.
All right, go for it. we all get award. That's your answer?
That's it. That's the answer. Everyone gets an award.
Oh God. All right. One last thing before we jump into recalls. This was fascinating. There's an article in Ars Technica, and of course, I never thought about this, It's titled "After Hackers Hit an Iowa Company, Cars Around the Country Failed to Start." Just quick story on this. This is a company that sells interlock systems, breathalyzers for people who've been convicted, I guess, of DUIs. They have to blow on this to get their car to start to show that, hey, I'm not drunk. But hackers managed to hack the company behind this and access their database. So none of these breathalyzer systems will work, which is amazing. Because apparently while you're driving, it'll randomly ask you at times to blow into it to make sure that you're still sober. That sounds like a good idea, but also sounds incredibly dangerous. So you're going 65 miles down the highway. Hey, blow into this pipe for a second. But now hackers have knocked this system offline. So I think autonomous vehicles and everything coming forward, computer connected, will be safe and great.
Yeah, I mean, basically, once you're in this system, you have to go and get the device calibrated every month. If you're not able to do that, the device shuts down. You can't drive because most states you have to put this on one car. If you drive, you have to drive that one car. So these folks, I don't feel sorry for a lot of them, by the way, or any of them really, since there's a reason why they're putting this device in their car, and it's something else that we are pretty adamant about stopping, which is drunk driving. But here, the folks couldn't go in and get their calibrations done, which means they would be locked out of their vehicle and unable to drive, unable to get to work, that sort of thing. That's clearly a problem. But like Anthony alluded to, this is, just one of many, many, many databases out there that probably aren't totally secure, that could impact vehicle safety ultimately. And, just one other area where we need effective cybersecurity in automobiles.
I don't understand, though. I thought computers never get distracted. They never make mistakes. They never, it's a computer. It can't be wrong.
Yeah.
You keep on believing that, Fred. So this is A, predictable, and B, there's a special case I wonder about. Years ago, there was a little box that would enforce auto payments. So if you were a bad credit risk, they put a box in your car, and that you would have to basically feed it quarters, except you would pay your bill, and then the car dealer that sold it to you would send out a code turning your car back on for another week. It wasn't rental. It was just keeping you on a short leash for car payments. Wow. Keep paying car payments. And there was a mess up and all the cars bricked, right? So this kind of thing is inevitable. But the other one is, if it times out while you're driving, forget about the cyber attack, just normal design. If it times out while you're driving, does it lock the transmission on the highway?
Yeah.
And again, there's a precedent for that. There's several aircraft, more than one aircraft, where if you leave the engine running too long, the engine shuts down, even if it's in flight, because there's a timer that rolls over. And one of them, it's only like 30 days or something.
What?
You have to reboot. There's one aircraft where you have to reboot the jet engines every 30 days or else they shut down in flight. Yeah, it's special. And so as soon as I hear anyone that there's a timeout, I ask what happens if the timeout hits while you're mid-mission, because this is very foreseeable.
What airline is this?
This is like all of them. No, Airbuses have this problem. Boeing's had this problem with different things, but it all amounts, there's some 32-bit counter that when it runs out of bits, it rolls over and the engine stops working. And the solution is to reboot the engine every couple of weeks.
Oh my God. Oh, well, yeah.
There's people who don't like flying with me. There's a reason, it turns out. I know too many stories.
How do you fly? That's a better question.
I fly frequently because I have confidence that the people know what they're doing as long as they're adequately staffed.
All right, let's jump into recalls as I cancel my upcoming flights. First up, Hyundai, 61,093 vehicles, the 2026 Palisade Hybrid, the regular Palisade. The second and third row power seat assemblies equipped in the subject vehicles may not respond to contact with an occupant or object as intended during activation of certain powered seat functions, including the automatic power folding function and the one-touch tilt and slide feature of the second row power seat assembly. So
this happened because there was a fatality recently in March in one of the Hyundai Palisade vehicles. There's also a Kia recall. It's much smaller. on their Telluride, and it's these kind of elite trims. It's not the base models that have a lot of power controls for their seats. And one of these controls, essentially what's going on here is it's not sensitive enough to objects or people that are in those seats. And when you push the button to fold it down, it doesn't reverse as it should. There is no federal regulation on this subject. Power windows are required in many circumstances to reverse. But despite pushing somewhat for this over the years for all power accessories and vehicles, that would include power doors, the power lift gate in the back, the power seats as well, because this isn't the first time we've seen an incident involving power seats injuring or killing someone. There are no federal standards around these products that require them to auto reverse, set minimum safety standards to ensure that the systems can do so. And we think that would have made a difference in this case. Hyundai has got a temporary fix that they're putting out over the air, or that these owners can go to dealers to get, that increases the sensitivity of the anti-reverse software. And there's a final fix coming ultimately as soon as they figure out the actual root cause here. They're still doing that and working to develop their remedy.
Oh, please get that fixed, people. As Michael said, Kia also same recall, 568 vehicles, the 2027 Telluride hybrid. And that's the exact same issue, right?
Yep.
Okay. Then, a rare entrant, Ford. 254,640 vehicles, the 2022 to 2025 Lincoln Navigator, the 24 to 25 Nautilus, the 25 Aviator, unexpected and repeated resets of the image processing module. Whatever, rear view camera bullshit. Come on. You just put this one here on purpose because Phil's on the show and he'll tell me how complicated this stuff is. I get it.
Yeah. Well, I left out a Toyota one that was a same problem, but we see one of these virtually every week. So
I've got to jump in.
Hey,
I got a letter in the mail. My car has a recall.
It was a rear view camera?
Yes.
Bravo.
Wow.
Although it isn't the rear view camera, it's the head unit. It's not the camera this time.
Right.
The old car actually had problems with the camera and the wiring and all that. This one's the head unit. Is takes a long time to start up. It's like, yeah, I knew that. I'm glad maybe this time the software fix will fix it. We're going to find out.
Good luck.
Actually, after this show, this afternoon, I'm going to go down and see if the over-the-air update really works because it came out today. We're going to find out.
All
right.
Well,
I know this. Not only did I get the letter, but I went to the NHTSA website, put in my VIN, which I do once every couple months. And sure enough, the recall came up as active. So it's the real deal. Yeah. Not some hacker trying to trick me in by sending me a fake mail.
Like, we'll get him. We'll get him with that rear view camera. All right. So, yeah. that's, oh, you know what? Why not? Let's do one more. It is not a recall. It is an investigation. And it's an investigation of a company called Tesla. So Tesla's FSD is being investigated because it's no good.
Yeah, this is the older investigation. There's a newer one where they're failing to stop for stoplights, failure to follow traffic laws, essentially. But this was the first FSD investigation that was opened in 2024 that involves the system not being able to detect when the environment and the roadway it's operating in, is reduced the visibility, and the cameras on the Tesla can't quite detect everything. This is basically a failure of full self-driving to detect when it's coming into a zone or weather or whatever that it can't operate in safely, and warning the driver that the driver has to take over the complete control of the vehicle and that sort of thing. At this point, it looks like NHTSA is trying, usually at this state where they move to an engineering analysis and upgrade the preliminary evaluation, they have decided that there's probably a need for a recall. That's just how things typically operate. We don't have any information that that's what's going on here. But it is interesting for a lot of reasons, particularly that this is something that we've long pushed back on Tesla about, because there is just no evidence that these camera-only systems, particularly Teslas, can operate safely in a lot of weather environments that challenge visibility. And so, while this ultimately, it could still be, depending on how Tesla fights a recall here, 5 to 10 years before we might see something actually happen here, and in the meantime, we have politics interceding because NHTSA has to, the administrator in consultation with the Secretary of Transportation are going to have a role to play here. And, they're going to have to talk to Elon and negotiate what happens with the recall. We are on the lookout for another questionable recall fix here that's cheap for Tesla, allowing NHTSA to claim they did something, but in fact, not really doing a whole lot for safety on our roads. But we are very interested in this investigation, and we'll continue to update all of our listeners as it progresses.
Wonderful.
If I can add to that, so let me give you an example. Let's say it has trouble in fog, which probably is one of the things, fog and mist, right? You can say, well, don't drive it when it's foggy. Well, how foggy is foggy? Is a 400-meter haze fog, or 100 meters, or 50 meters, or 10 meters? And by the way, how many drivers are trained to estimate how far they can see in the fog? And it probably depends on front lit, back lit, day, night. How's a driver supposed to know when it's too foggy if the car doesn't tell them? It's completely unrealistic. And what about smoke? Well, it's smoke and smog. And if it's low-lying cloud, is that fog or is that a cloud? And so trying to pin down an engineering spec and have a normal person, ordinary person, implement an engineering judgment that an engineer would require specialized equipment to measure, it's not happening. So for all these vehicles, it has to self-enforce the environmental limits, because it's easy to say, well, there have to be good road lines, or it can't be foggy, it has to be day. And all these things have these shades of gray, even day, night. Well, what about twilight? Now, is it nautical twilight or civil twilight or astronomical twilight? What do you mean by twilight even, right? All these things, there's no way for a normal human to know exactly where the cutoff is. And if they're one little bit over the cutoff, all of a sudden it's their fault, and it's unreasonable to expect them to know that. So these systems, to be safe, really have to police and enforce their own limits. There's really no other way to do it.
Agreed. Maybe NHTSA or someone can say, hey, these are the definitions of what we mean by too foggy.
Well, I think that it's more, you said too foggy, good for you. I don't care what you tell the driver. If they press the go button, it goes, it's on you, it's not on them. Because how are they supposed to know that it was 49-meter visibility, not meter visibility? How in the world were they going to know that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, it's the computer driver, man. It wasn't me. Okay? It was the computer. And my friend.
Pull that card out, put it in the jail cell, everything's fixed, good to go. Only if you live in Oklahoma. In other places, it's more complicated.
All right. We're moving to Oklahoma, folks. And with that, that's our show. No. Thank you so much to Phil Koopman for coming by again. And we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Phil.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.